You are listening to Packers Talk Radio Network.
PackersTalk.com.
Eddie Lacy, Mike Daniels, Gilbert Brown, Don Barclay, Micah Hyde, your Green Bay Packers, yesterday's legends and today's superstars. From corporate or non-profit events to private parties, add some spice, hire a Packers player from Mayfield Sports Marketing. For details, just go to PackersTalk.com and click on Player Appearances.
Are you looking for some signed Packer memorabilia?
Look no further than Waukesha Sports Card.
If a Green Bay Packer can sign it, Waukesha Sports Cards has it.
Check our website for upcoming Packer player and legend signings.
Go to WaukeshaSportsCards.com.
Alert, clear all channels.
Fresh from America's Dairyland, ladies and gentlemen,
From the Benches Podcast.
Touchdown, Packers.
Packers Talk Radio Network. You're listening to From the Benches with Ross Uglum and Ryan Hilsland.
Hello and welcome back to From the Benches bi-week edition. My name is Ross Uglum. I'm a writer at PackersTalk.com, and with me, as always, is Ryan Hilsland. Ryan, how are you?
Doing pretty good. Having a little lazy Packer-free Sunday so far, but let's dive in and talk some Packers, even though we didn't get to watch them today.
Yeah, it's stress-free, but it's kind of boring. We'll hit on the news quick here. The only injury really from the San Diego game that I can remember, of any consequence really was Ty Montgomery, that ankle injury there on the sideline. Sounds like there is no damage to the knee, at least as far as it has been released to us, the media, looking like just an ankle sprain, and he hasn't even been ruled out for Denver. Obviously, we're going to learn a lot more as this practice week goes and as we see actual injury reports. Ryan, the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel did a pretty deep investigation on LaTroy Guion during the bye week here. It reveals that some not so great stuff happened with him when he was a member of the Minnesota Vikings, and kind of, I guess, if anything, maybe brings into question his signing, originally, as far as there was a domestic violence issue, some other substance-related issues, and kind of sheds light on the fact that maybe he got a pretty good deal when he got busted with pot down in Florida during the offseason. Do these issues concern you at all, or now that he's kind of been through the legal system and so on, and now as a member of the Packers, is it not such a big deal?
I mean, it concerns me a little bit. Obviously, you don't want anyone on the team that you're rooting for to be in legal trouble, especially to the extent that it appears that he has been. Hopefully he isn't a really big part of their plans going forward. Kind of like to just see him, them move on from him, especially with the way, B.J. Rauchi's come back and kind of, made him more expendable and not really a very important piece of the defense like he was last year. So as far as I'm concerned, they can just kind of move on from him whenever that chance arises. But it concerns me. I'd prefer to not have a guy with that kind of speckled past on the team that I root for every Sunday.
Yeah, domestic violence is never cool. That's kind of a big hot button issue and something that, is just not acceptable in any way. And at the same time, I think you're right. He's probably not a huge part of the plan going forward. I think one of the reasons he was back with the team this year is because he got in trouble and because it became so cheap kind of to keep him on the roster. I think he's probably playing this season at the veterans minimum. he certainly played at a level last year that was commensurate with more money than that. So the fact that he was a bargain because of these issues are probably why he's on the team this year. I think B.J. Raji might be playing his way into a new contract, and he's probably going to be the nose tackle going forward, not LaTroy Guion, and that's going to be kind of the way it goes from here on out. I don't anticipate him being a part of the Packers long term, but who knows? Once again, we open the news talking about an injury, and that's been the way it seems like that it's been for us as Packer fans for every year except last year. And this year, ESPN did their injury study, and once again, we are the number one team in the league as far as injuries are concerned. We have lost 78 games to starters. Ryan, is this starting to remind you of 2010 at all?
Yeah, it's hard not to get that feeling with so many guys being out. Obviously, Jordy for the whole season, but it seems like everybody on the offensive side of the ball is banged up. Knock on wood a little bit, as everyone but Rodgers. It is. I mean, hopefully some of these guys are not lengthy injuries. We were hoping that this bye week was going to cure some ailments going into the Denver game. We'll see if that's the case, but it absolutely reminds you of 2011, where it just seemed like everybody was just dropping like flies, and those a lot of those injuries extended into the playoffs and into the Super Bowl run. But hopefully that isn't the case. I mean, we make a Super Bowl run, great, but you'd think if these offensive injuries continue to linger and continue to be problems, the odds of that happening go down quite a bit, I would think.
Yeah, the one thing that I think is a major difference between this season and 2010, though, is the length of injuries. That team ended up with between 15 and 17 guys on injured reserve, and most of them were major contributors. It seems like besides Jordy, all the injuries that have occurred this season, I guess Sam Barrington too, but most of the injuries are week-to-week type injuries, and guys are eventually coming back, and that's a huge difference, I think, between this season and that season, is that you are going to see B.J. Raji come back. You're more than likely going to see Ty Montgomery come back. You're definitely going to see Morgan Burnett and Devontae Adams return. So that is promising as far as the injury front goes. And speaking of injuries, this was a guy whose career I actually saw end in person, and a guy that often misunderstood, never quite got to his potential as a Packer, but Jermichael Finley did officially retire from the NFL this past week. Ryan, any final words about Jermichael?
Yeah, he was always one of my favorites. I never got into the Jermichael Finley hate that a lot of Packer fans did. He rubbed some people the wrong way, but I always liked him. I always looked at him as a guy who was bursting with potential. Just you're kind of just waiting until it finally comes out. Obviously, that never really occurred. Career cut short by injury, and it's unfortunate. He was fun to watch when he was good.
Yeah, I don't think you or I or any other Packer fan will ever forget his performance in that 2009 playoff game against the Arizona Cardinals. We thought he was going to be the next big thing. Honestly, before either Jimmy Graham or Rob Gronkowski ended up being the next big thing. Ryan, you and I talked a little bit during the pre-show about doing our mid-season review here at the bye week. It's not technically mid-season, but we always do a game recap and then a preview for the next week, every week here on From the Benches. So maybe doing a mid-season review, during a normal show is asking a lot, or would kind of press us for time. So we figured we've seen 6 games. Let's get some of our initial thoughts out of the way. We'll start with the obvious caveat. We're going to talk about the offensive most valuable player. I'll let you go first, but we're not going to allow the answer to be Aaron Rodgers, because that's always the answer.
Right. Yeah, he's clearly the MVP of the whole team. I would think. But as far as an offensive guy who's been most valuable for me, it's got to be James Jones thus far. He came in obviously as a late signing when the injuries started happening, and has played well over my expectations, well over anyone's expectations. I think he came into this week leading the league in touchdowns. I don't know if that held up through today's games, but he's been huge. He's been a great extra weapon for Rodgers to go to with Nelson out, with Adams being out, with Cobb being a little bit hobbled. It's been a really big deal that James Jones has been in there and been so productive. He's been huge. Was a massive addition that he was very lucky that the Giants decided to part ways with James Jones, and he was so unfortunate that he was to come back here because he's playing very, very well, and he's a big part of the reason that the Packers have been able to score as much as they have with all those injuries on offense.
Yeah, Ryan, I think ultimately I agree with you. The most valuable player most likely has been James Jones. Randall Cobb is a guy that you would think of, but he's been beat up. So has Eddie Lacy as far as the most talented players. I want to talk a little bit about another James and give my MVP to James Starks. To be honest with you, Ryan, without James Starks, this team would be in a real rough way because Eddie Lacy is beat up. He has struggled to run the ball. And if James Starks wasn't able to run the ball, I'm not really sure what we'd be able to do on offense as beat up as the receiving core is. And also the time that Brian Bulaga missed as well. Aaron Rodgers is, as it stands, having a difficult time finding guys open. And the idea of, James Starks not being a threat, Eddie Lacy not being a threat, and teams playing a cover 2 shell against receivers that can't get open is really a concerning thought. And I think something that might, possibly be going on without James Starks. He had his biggest game last week against San Diego, so there might be a little recency bias, but at the same time, he's clearly been the more effective back between him and Eddie Lacy thus far through these 6 weeks, and the balance that he's providing on offense is buying time for these younger receivers to get in sync with Rodgers and get the passing offense going, which if this team's going to Super Bowl 50, that's how they're going to get there anyway. Ryan, we'll move on to the defensive side of the ball now. Obviously, I think every year, especially when he's healthy, and he has been healthy this year, Clay Matthews is probably the defensive MVP, so I'll just probably let that one, kind of slide and maybe not pick Clay in this situation, the same that we sort of exempted Rodgers from the first conversation. Ryan, through 6 weeks and in this bye week, who has your defensive MVP been who is not named Clay Matthews?
I'm going with one of my personal favorite guys, probably my favorite guy on the defense, Mike Daniels. He has been just a wrecking ball on the defensive line, just causing havoc in the backfield against everyone that the Packers have played so far. He hasn't had games where he's really disappeared. He's made an impact in every game this season. He's in the backfield. He's really causing problems for opposing offenses, and I think it's a big reason why the Packers' defense has been stepping up so as much as they have this season. Is Daniel's ability to be in the backfield and disrupt what's going on in the trenches, and that kind of filters its way through the rest of the defense. I think. It's been kind of a collective effort as far as the improvement in the secondary. The linebackers have been kind of a mix and match on the inside. So for me, it's Mike Daniels on that defensive line being really living up to the potential that we thought he had for the last couple of years. He's really putting it together. He's been really, really good on the defensive line, and I think he's the best not Matthews defender for the Packers this year so far.
I agree, and I will talk about 2 other guys specifically, but I can't really go against Mike Daniels on this one. It may not completely show up on the stat sheet, but he is absolutely collapsing the interior of that defensive line. He's making that jump from year 3 to year 4 that you see so often because of how excellent the player development program is in Green Bay. There is no other answer besides Mike Daniels, though. On a consistent game-to-game basis, he is the best Packers defensive lineman. And when he and B.J. Raji had it cooking together, that was really something. I mean, those interior offensive lines were just absolutely collapsing, and it was a lot of fun to watch. Obviously, as Packer fans that have seen, offensive lines kind of take it to the defensive line, to watch those two dominate was a lot of fun. Obviously, Raji missed a little bit of time, and maybe it wasn't quite at the level that Daniels was at, and because of his consistency, because of his ability to stay healthy, and because of his overall impact on the game, I'm going to agree with you and go with Mike Daniels as the defensive MVP here at the bye week. But two guys I really like to make mention of are, first of all, Nick Perry has really stepped up as a pass rusher and as a run defender this year. He's playing on an expiring contract. The Packers chose not to pick up his fifth-year option, but I'm starting to think that might not really mean anything as far as his future with the team. It just means they didn't want to pay him like a fifth-year first-round pick. I would not be surprised to see Perry get a 2 or 3 year prove-it deal on a lower contract, and then if he does develop into this excellent pass rusher, he'll still be in his mid to late 20s and will get a chance to get that big deal one last time, before it's time to hang him up. So Nick Perry's a guy that I think needs to really be made mention of, and hopefully his shoulder injury and this time off will kind of mean that he'll be back for Denver, and if not Denver, at least the game in Carolina for sure. And then Micah Hyde, that's a guy that I write about a lot, a guy that I really like and that you and I talk about quite a bit. And he has struggled in a few games, but this was a defense, man, that used to really, really collapse when they lose an important guy in the secondary. There was a season-long collapse in 2011 when Nick Collins went down, and this defense would habitually collapse when Morgan Burnett would have to miss a game. And Micah Hyde just is the glue that holds this whole thing together. He's been able to play both safety positions, without problem, and also slide down and play nickelback or dimeback when called upon. He's just a very, very impressive football player, along with being an extremely underrated punt returner. In my opinion, he's one of the best 4 or 5 guys at that position in the league, and provides Green Bay with something in the return game that they haven't always had. And I just really appreciate Micah Hyde for everything he's been able to do to kind of keep this defense from falling into disarray without Morgan Burnett and some other guys in the secondary that have been banged up here and there. Micah Hyde, I think, has been really important. Ryan, this is a draft and develop type of team. Always has been. Probably will be for the rest of Ted Thompson's tenure here in Green Bay. Let's talk about the 2015 draft class a little bit and what we've seen out of these rookies for the first 6 weeks. Let's go offense first. Ryan, what have you seen from the rookies on offense so far this season?
Well, I mean, the biggest one that we've seen really so far, Ty Montgomery. He's shown some flashes. Obviously, we just talked about the injury he suffered. Hopefully, he's able to get back and continue to make an impact. But he's been a really solid addition. He's been good on kick returns like we thought he would, and with all the wide receiver injuries, he's been asked, to make an impact on the actual offensive side of the ball more than we really thought he would. But I think he's been a great example or a great addition from the draft class on the offensive side of the ball. He's been very, very good. As far as the other guys, sorry, I was pulling up the draft class and lost it.
It'd just be Hundley and Ripkowski. Hundley we haven't seen in regular season action.
Were those the only 3 guys I was trying to look in?
So far as I remember, those would be the only 3 guys. I know this was Backman, right? Yep, you're right. I know that this was the first year in a very long time that Ted didn't take an offensive lineman, which is what I was kind of going through in my head.
All right, I've got the list now. Sorry, that was poor preparation.
Yep. Any thoughts on Ripkowski or Backman and their limited action?
I mean, as far as special teams guys, it's hard to really grade how they're really doing without really diving in deep on special teams, which is something I haven't really done yet. I think Ripkowski, you've seen flashes on special teams of him making plays on kick coverage and things like that. Hundley, hopefully we don't see it all this season, as you know, he's in there as the third string quarterback. He was going to be a developmental guy, and I still think that was a good pick. I like that he's on the roster, and I think the future is it'll be interesting to watch him go through and develop in the future in McCarthy's system. But as far as the offense goes, we didn't do a whole lot, for immediate impact on the offense. Montgomery was going to be a special teams guy, and then was kind of forced into action. Most of the draft impact is on the defensive side of the ball.
That's correct. I've seen a little bit from Rip when they've run that inverted wishbone that they often trot out. I think he's impressive as a lead blocker. I'm guessing this is probably the last year with John Kuhn, although I feel like we've been saying that on the show since its inception. So maybe John Kuhn just will play for the Packers until you and I are dead. I'm not, 100% sure on that. The Montgomery thing, though, obviously is the biggest. That was a concern. A lot of the draft guys, even the guys that you and I talked to and have had on the show before, couldn't believe that the Packers were really going to take a kick returner in the third round of the draft, in the top 100. And that, some of the scouting reports were saying that Montgomery was maybe a tailback and not a receiver, and, it's going to be 2 or 3 years until he's able to contribute on offense. So what are you doing? And you and I, to be honest, we kind of bought into that a little bit. We felt like as a kick returner, he was a luxury pick. This was a year that they were, Super Bowl bound, or at least felt like they were Super Bowl bound. So maybe getting an awesome kick returner was a good idea, but we were all wrong. I mean, he is a useful offensive player right now. He's extremely strong with the ball in his hands, breaks a ton of tackles for a wide receiver. Very useful on bubble screens, and as a guy that you can use out of the backfield with Randall Cobb is exciting as well. I know that's how he got hurt, but it's football. I know there were some Packers fans up in arms. Why are you using him as a running back? That's how he got hurt. Well, he just got hurt because he got hurt. Injuries happen. It's football. I don't think using him or Cobb out of the backfield, although Cobb does have a shoulder injury, puts either one of them, at greater risk of injury than running them over the middle into linebackers. It's kind of the same type of deal, but he's a very versatile guy on offense and a useful weapon, and we'll see what his utilization looks like, because I think we're going to have Devontae Adams back at full health against Denver, and then hopefully then again against Carolina. Ryan, on offense, who do you feel like you need to see more out of?
I think really in the whole offensive line needs to do a better job in run blocking. It's we were going into this season, thinking this was going to be the best offensive line of the McCarthy era. McCarthy said that himself, and they've still been good in pass protection. Josh Sitton gave up a sack last week, which you don't see very often, but when Bulaga has been in there, the pass protection's been pretty solid, but the run game is not opening up the holes like they have the last couple of years. Josh Sitton, I know his PFF run blocking grade is not as good as it has been in the past. I don't think anybody is really standing out in run blocking grades at least from Pro Football Focus, and that's, I think, contributing to why Eddie Lacy hasn't had the type of early season you were expecting. Obviously, he's been dinged up a little bit, but he hasn't had a lot of stuff to work with, even when he has been in there. Obviously, Starks has been able to be a little bit more effective due to health, but I really don't think that the run blocking and the run game have been really where they need to be yet. So I want to see the offensive line pick it up in the run game and hopefully continue to be solid in pass protection.
I think that you kind of encompassed a lot, and I guess the easy answer is Eddie Lacy, so I'm not going to go there. Offensive line has so much to do with that. So does his ankle injury. Obviously, you'd like to see better numbers from Eddie Lacy, but I'm not worried about it. I mean, it's due to injury, and it's due to circumstance, and once he gets healthy, I think it will be a lot better running the ball. I think it's that simple. At the same time, I think one of the guys I would like to see more out of who has been healthy is Richard Rodgers. He's been fine, but you want to see more in that first to second year jump, and I really thought that you would see an increase in production when he stopped splitting snaps with Andrew Corliss, who obviously Green Bay lost to injury, and that's another guy in Corliss, that Rodgers legitimately trusts in this offense. I just would like to see more out of Richard Rodgers. I know maybe he's not going to be the most dynamic tight end ever just because of his athletic limitations, but he needs to have more of an impact on the game. I do remember one crucial drop, and that play, honestly, was probably going to be a long touchdown. He can't make mistakes like that. If you're going to have a guy whose value is so tied up in his ability to catch everything thrown his way, he actually has to catch everything thrown his way. How about on defense, Ryan? What are you thinking? Who do you need to see more from? Who's not playing, kind of up to expectations?
Well, let's go back to the draft class first. As far as the defensive draft class, obviously we've seen a big impact from the first round pick in Demarius Randall. Quentin Rollins, a second round pick, also a cornerback, has shown some flashes. That's been huge to the improvement on defense. Those two guys coming in as defensive backs right away. The cornerback was where the big departures were on the defensive side of the ball after last season, and it was a big question coming into this season. Those guys have very admirably filled in for the losses of Devon House and Tramon Williams. So that's huge to get those guys contributing right off the bat, and that makes those first three picks all contributors in the first 6 weeks of their rookie season, which is pretty impressive from a draft class. Then you're looking at Jake Ryan, who has been, I think, a little bit disappointing. He was a guy you wanted to come in and be a starter at inside linebacker. He was kind of drafted to be that, and even when Sam Barrington went down, he really didn't come back in. I know he's dealing with an injury now, but he has not seen the amount of snaps on defense that I was expecting him to, and clearly that's because the coaches aren't seeing in practice. They don't think that he's ready. They think there are better options at the inside linebacker spot, and that's unfortunate. I was very excited about him after we took him after the off season, and it just kind of hasn't materialized yet. Obviously, he's a rookie 4th round pick. There's going to be more to come, but when the 4th round pick is the first one who's not making an impact on the team, that's a pretty good deal. And then Chris Ringo, a guy we both like as far as 6th round picks go, is sitting on the practice squad, and hopefully there's some stuff to come from him. What did you think of the defensive side of the ball for the rookies?
Well, I've been extremely impressed, and I think part of the Jake Bryan thing is injury, too. He's missed a couple games due to hamstring. They kind of handed that job off to Nate Palmer, who has been painfully average. And at the same time, the inside linebacker play from guys like A.J. Hawk and Brad Jones was so below average that Nate Palmer just being, slightly less than solid or solid has, the standards just are what they are, and I think that he might have had to have been more of a train wreck than he has been to require the presence of Jake Ryan in the main rotation. But at the same time, that might have happened if he'd been able to stay healthy. Defensive guys outside of Jake Ryan, I think, have been very, very impressive. I think that the two defensive backs that were taken highly have been extremely impressive. Demarius Randall is allowing less than 45% of the passes thrown his way to be completed. And for a converted safety, that's extremely impressive, especially for a guy who's playing outside. Normally, a safety conversion, would play slot corner or nickel, and he's just playing the outside corner across from Sam Shields in the nickel every single time, and it's very impressive to me, and I think to most Packer fans, what he's been able to accomplish, even though he hasn't been able to get his hands on one yet. He doesn't have an interception. Interceptions seem to be the bread and butter of Quentin Rollins, who, despite very limited playing time, already has 2 picks. And yes, they came in the same game, but one of them went back to the house. So he's been extremely impressive in that way. And then, like you said, Christian Ringo is a guy that they liked well enough at least to keep on the practice squad. He's a shorter, squattier, kind of diet version of Mike Daniels. And so he's a guy that, is a possible Daniels replacement if, God forbid, they let him go. Or, it's just another plugger along that defensive line, another penetrator that we as Packers fans can be excited about for the future. As far as guys that I need to see more from on defense, that guy is Jake Ryan. And I need to see more from is sometimes a negative connotation, but that's not how I mean it. I actually want to see more Jake Ryan. I am very unimpressed with Nate Palmer, and that's not to say that he hasn't been, that he has been awful, or that he hasn't been better than Brad Jones or AJ Hawk, because I think he has. I mean, I think he has been useful, and I don't think there's a lot of plays that he makes where I am shouting Nate Palmer at the TV, and that used to happen quite a bit with those other 2 guys. So a guy that I need to see more from on defense is a guy that I actually want to see more of, and that's Jake Ryan. How about you?
For me on defense, I'm going to go into the secondary where pretty much everybody has exceeded expectations except for Casey Hayward. He's been, maybe exposed isn't the right word, but he has not played to the level we're used to seeing out of Casey Hayward, and he's been playing inside more than we thought he would early in the season. We kind of expected Hayward to be playing outside, and like you said, to have Demarius Randall inside in that slot role. Randall's been playing outside a lot, which means Hayward has been at his more comfortable spot in the slot, but he just hasn't been that lockdown slot corner that we've seen in years past from him. And you really want to get that back, because Sam Shields has been playing very well on the outside. We talked about Randall and Rollins playing well. HaHa Clinton-Dix has been very good at safety, I think, and you talked about Micah Hyde earlier also. So the guys in the secondary are playing very well. I kind of want to see Casey Hayward get back to where he has been. And then, when you get Morgan Burnett back, I'm going to be really impressed with what we have going on in the secondary, as long as Casey Hayward's able to kind of get back to where he has been over the last few years. So it's Casey Hayward for me, and that I have faith that he can get back and play at a higher level for the rest of the season, and that makes me very excited for what we're going to see in the secondary for the rest of the season.
And I think what we're going to see in the secondary for the rest of the season is very interesting, because at the same time, the defensive formation that they've used in the nickel when Morgan Burnett has been a part of things actually takes Randall off the field, puts Hayward outside, and drops Hyde down into the slot, which at this point to me, seems like an ineffective use of resources, as good as Demarius Randall has been. At the same time, how can you see what these guys have done in nickel and then walk over to Micah Hyde and say, hey, we're not going to play you in nickel anymore?
Yeah, it's a good problem to have. They kind of have a bit of an embarrassment of riches at corner and in the secondary overall, and that's not really something we were expecting to have coming into the season. That was a big question. So it's nice that's that's an issue we're discussing, and instead of discussing whichever Randall, we need to get Randall off the field because he's getting burned all the time. There are a lot of poor things that we could be talking about in the secondary. This is a nice problem to have.
Absolutely. Ryan, you and I sat down with Aaron Nagler and Corey Benke of Cheesehead TV before the season at our office away from home at the Green Bay Distillery right there in Green Bay, Wisconsin, across from Ray Nitschke Field, and talked about our predictions for this upcoming season. I think I was waffling between 13-3 and 14-2, and you were pretty stuck on 13-3. Is that correct?
Yeah, I said 13-3 before the season. That was my prediction.
Do you have any amendment that you want to make to that? Do you feel any differently about what you've seen through this team or from this team through the first 6 weeks? Obviously, you have to take the 6-0 record into account, but at the same time, what we've seen as far as film study is concerned, that has to matter as well.
Yeah, I think I'm going to amend my prediction and go with 14-2. Looking at the rest of the schedule, basically I see 3 games that are going to be questionable for me, and that's the upcoming game against the Broncos, the following week against the Panthers, and week 17 against the Cardinals. All of those games are on the road. I think we're probably going to drop 2 of those 3, or I think the Packers at least drop one of those, and then maybe lose one they shouldn't, maybe to a division rival at some point, maybe on the road at Minnesota possibly. But I think it's likely that we maybe drop 2 of those 3 tough games on the road, and then kind of do a clean sweep of everybody else through the season. Or like I said, go 2-1 in those 3 tough games, and then drop one that doesn't really make sense. So I think there are 2 losses coming the rest of the season, and with a 6-0 start, that ends up with a 14-2 finish at the end of the year, and hopefully that's good enough. I think 14-2 is definitely good enough for a first round bye. We'll see if it is good enough for home field throughout for that first seed, but 14-2 is where I'm going pretty solidly for the rest of the year.
I'm going to kind of wimp out here, I guess, and I'm going to say that if the Packers win the next 2 games, so at Denver and at Carolina, I am going to amend my prediction to 14-2. If they split, I'll stick with 13-3. I think right between 13-3 and 14-2 is where I was waffling last time, and I think if Jordy Nelson were healthy, I would say nope, 14-2. I was right initially when I thought they were that good, but just the way that the offense has kind of struggled, you're right. They might drop a game to somebody that they shouldn't. And so if they do split at Carolina, at Denver, and are 7-1 at the midway point, I would hedge a little bit and just say that the 6-2 second half of the season will lead them right to a 13-3 record, which quite frankly should be good enough for the 1 seed in the NFC and hold field advantage throughout the playoffs there at Lambeau Field. So that's my prediction, which isn't really a prediction, and that's, I guess, maybe unfortunate. Let's preview that Broncos game right now. Ryan, what are your thoughts on how the Packers match up offensively with Denver?
Well, that's going to depend a lot on where the Packers stand injury-wise on the offensive side of the ball. That's where basically all of their most of their important injuries are on the offensive side at this point. You need Cobb and James Jones to get healthy. Hopefully that happens in 2 weeks. You need Adams to get healthy. You need Lacey to get healthy. And that's very important because Denver's defense is very, very good. They have I believe, leading the league in sacks. They are very, very good at putting pressure on opposing quarterbacks, and with DeMarcus Ware and Von Miller. Wow, that was a blank. With Ware and Von Miller, as the bookend pass rushers, they are really wreaking havoc on quarterbacks. Hopefully, David Bakhtiari and Brian Bulaga are able to hold up to that pressure and keep Rodgers standing, but they're also very good in the secondary. And with the way that the banged up receivers have kind of struggled to get open, that's going to be an issue. If Adams comes back healthy, if Cobb is able to be more at 100% and they're able to get some separation and be more of the guys we expect them to be when they're healthy, then I think the offense is going to be just fine. But if those guys are still hobbled a little bit, I think the Denver secondary is going to be able to kind of bottle up the receivers and kind of see what we've seen the previous few weeks when Rodgers kind of doesn't have anywhere to throw it. He's not going to be forcing balls into small spots. He's going to sit back there and wait for guys to make moves, and then you have to worry about Miller and Ware getting the quarterback again. So I think it's going to be a very difficult matchup for the Packers offense, particularly if they are still hobbled by those injuries. If they're kind of rolling at 100%, then I think they're going to be able to be effective. But it's a big question mark at this point because Denver's very good on defense, and that it could be a problem if we're not at full strength.
Yeah, the biggest part I think is definitely the pass blocking. You got to get Ware and Von Miller blocked up. That's the number one thing is keeping Rodgers upright. Obviously, I think we keep talking about a pecking order type of thing. When Devontae Adams comes back as the number one receiver, hopefully you have a better version of Randall Cobb. And then if you've got Randall at 100%, Devontae as the number one, and James Jones playing on the outside, there you've really got something. And I think Denver's also a team that you can run on a little bit. They haven't been that impressive on the other end, and we'll talk about how Green Bay matches up defensively with Denver. So I don't think that Green Bay has to go out there and score 38 points to win the game. Therefore, running the ball can be more of a part of the game plan. Ryan, talk about how this Packers defense matches up with Denver and of course Peyton Manning.
Yeah, and that it seems a little strange that going into a preview against Denver, you're worried more about what Denver's going to do on the defensive side of the ball as opposed to what they're doing on the offensive side of the ball. Peyton Manning has been really, really bad this season. They just haven't done what they need to on offense. Manning's been terrible. They haven't been able to get much going in the run game with C.J. Anderson, who I took in the first round of 2 different fantasy football leagues, not being able to get much going. Ronnie Hillman faring a little bit better, but not really doing any significant damage in the run game. They haven't been able to do much on offense, and that's surprising when you think about what they had going coming into the season. Obviously, Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders are very good wide receivers still, but Manning just hasn't been able to get them the ball as much as they need to. And I think we talked about the Packers secondary playing pretty well in the first part of the season. I think they're going to be able to. I don't think Sanders and Thomas are going to expose the Packers corners, expose the secondary, to the point where Manning can throw to them when they're wide open, and you can kind of overcome the struggles that Manning has had. I think we're going to be able to cover. Their wide receivers, Owen Daniels in the tight end spot hasn't really been a threat. So I really think they're not going to have wide open receivers for Manning to throw to, and that's going to be a struggle for him. I don't think Manning's going to do a whole lot. He's not going to have big windows, and that's been a problem for him this season. So I think, and also the Packers have been pretty good against the run early in the season, and this isn't a very good running team either. So I think the Packers defense matches up really, really well against what the Broncos have shown in the first part of the season. Now, obviously, Manning has been bad, but people were saying similar things about Tom Brady last season, and then he turned around and had a great season in the second half. So there's a chance that Manning comes back and does the same thing again, or does the same thing as Tom Brady did last year. But from what we've seen so far, I don't think the Broncos are going to be able to put up big numbers against this Packers defense.
Yeah, Manning looks pretty washed up, and I think that's kind of the important part about this whole thing is the Packers are the best defense that Manning's faced all year, and he hasn't done anything against the defenses that he has gone against. The Green Bay pass rush, especially with B.J. Raji back, coming right up the middle like that, that's the shortest route to Peyton Manning. He's going to want to get the ball out, and I think this will be the day that you see that first Casey Hayward interception, because he's going to try and get something out quick to Demaryius Thomas or to Emmanuel Sanders, and it's just going to not be very well thought out, and you see a lot of those mistakes from Manning. That's what really concerns a lot of the guys that I listen to and the guys that I read about Manning is not the arm strength and the lack thereof, and not being able to throw a spiral. It's the decision-making that's kind of gone by the wayside as well. Manning was always a very cerebral guy, and there are throws that he can't make anymore. There's no question about it. There are throws that get him in trouble. But now he's making decisions that are a problem, and he's making throws that he shouldn't. And those throws are being intercepted, and they're really causing a problem. And the biggest issue, besides the dwindling skill set of Peyton Manning, is that offensive line. It's not very good. They can't run block. And when you can't block up front, and you don't really invest in running backs, and they tried once with Monte Ball, and then they cut him. But they have running backs that, are undrafted guys, and without an offensive line, they've looked like undrafted guys. And so that's why I think, this Packers defense is really going to have a good day against Denver offensively, because, quite frankly, Denver offensively is not very good. Ryan, why don't you give me your game prediction for the Broncos, and we'll get out of here.
I think it's going to be very tight. Like I said, I worry about what the Packers offense is going to be able to do against a very good Denver defense. Obviously, injury, the way we've healed from injuries is going to be a big part of that. But I don't see a ton of points getting put up in this game. I've got the Packers scoring 20, couple touchdowns, couple field goals, and I have the Broncos final score at 17. I've got a field goal win out in Denver, but a low-scoring affair with a very good defense against the Packers offense, and a struggling Broncos offense against the Packers defense that's played relatively well so far this season.
Yeah, I keep looking at this matchup as well, and just how much Green Bay has struggled to move the ball, and then how much I attribute that to injuries and those guys that are or are not coming back. At the same time, Denver being so fantastic on defense and probably being, a little bit better than Green Bay is on defense, if not maybe a lot better. Although both defenses look to be, one of the best 6 or 7 groups in the league. But at the end of the day, the difference just becomes how much better Aaron Rodgers is than Peyton Manning. And right now, that's a huge difference. Manning is statistically operating as one of the worst quarterbacks in the league this season, and Rodgers has a touchdown to interception ratio of 15-2. As much flack as he is getting for not being as proficient as years past, his touchdown to interception ratio, I want to repeat, is 15-2. It just is an issue where Green Bay is going to be able to score enough points and put enough pressure on that Denver defense to where they're going to be able to get into the end zone more than once, and I'm not so sure that Denver is. I got a very similar prediction to you. I'm going to go 20-13 Packers in kind of a low-scoring affair. Certainly a game that keeps us on the edge of our seat. But I will say this: I would not be surprised by a Green Bay blowout win. I would not be surprised by that. I'm not predicting it, but if it happened, I would not be shocked. A la the 6-touchdown game in Houston, where you weren't really worried about the quarterback, but you were worried about the defense and the pass rush, and then all of a sudden, it's ass-kicking time. Guys, we want to thank you, as always, for listening to From the Benches. You can subscribe on iTunes and other podcast applications at the Packers Talk Network. If you do so, every time a new episode is made available to you, it will be automatically downloaded onto the device of your choice. In order to help us provide for you the best Packers content week after week, Please give us a rating on iTunes, and obviously the subscriptions help as well as far as searches are concerned. You can follow the show at From the Benches. You can follow me personally at Ross Uglum. And Ryan, where can they find you on Twitter?
I am at Hillsland358.
Thanks again for listening, and go Pack Go.
From the benches. From the benches.
Are you looking for some signed Packer memorabilia?
Look no further than Waukesha Sports Card.
If a Green Bay Packer can sign it, Waukesha Sports Cards has it.
Check our website for upcoming Packer player and legend signings.
Go to WaukeshaSportsCards.com.
Eddie Lacy, Mike Daniels, Gilbert Brown, Don Barclay, Micah Hyde, your Green Bay Packers, yesterday's legends and today's superstars. From corporate or nonprofit events to private parties, add some spice, hire a Packers player from Mayfield Sports Marketing. For details, just go to PackersTalk.com and click on Player Appearances.